Welcome. My name is Julia Borri, and we are here for a second episode of the INNOVAUD EXPAND on the topic Life Science Startups Adapt Your Regulatory Plan. Very happy to see you all online. We are in for 1.5 hour of very interesting discussion with our contributors of today, Pierre-Jean Wipff from INNOVAUD, Friedrich from Distalmotion, Brij Sahi, CEO of SwissDeCode, and Philippe Etter, a senior partner at Medidee. This episode is part of 4 episodes that we are organizing with the power and support of INNOVAUD. And this is the second one. As you can see, we had a first one a week ago on how to scale your Swiss-based startup globally. And in 2 weeks, we'll have an episode on how to manage your board during a crisis. And the last one will be on how to foster corporate partnerships online. My name is Julia Borri. I work for Venture Lab, a company supporting entrepreneurs all around Switzerland. And I will be your host today. Together with me, Pierre-Jean Wipff, senior partner at Medidee, will give you an introduction and explanation on the activities at INNOVAUD. Philippe Etter, a specialist in regulation clearances, will explain the general setting and frameworks on how to pass certain regulations for products in Medtech and life science in general. We have Brij Sahi with us, CEO of SwissDeCode, who will share his experience launching a new product that is related to COVID and what are the ways to mitigate the regulation tracks and maybe the fast tracks that you can get when you're launching a product nowadays that is related to COVID. Last but not least, we have Friedrich, who will share with us his experience with Distalmotion and the impact of the COVID crisis on his regulatory plan. What are the delays that were caused, and what were maybe the advantages of this crisis. A short video now to share with you the activities at INNOVAUD. We'll go a bit deeper in details about that in a minute, but here's just a quick taste.
Nous connaissons INNOVAUD depuis quelques années. C'est vraiment une porte d'entrée pour les entreprises qui cherchent à se développer. Ils organisent pas mal d'événements autour de l'innovation. Depuis la fin de l'année passée, nous avons un coach platine en organisation qui vient au sein de notre entreprise nous aider à améliorer nos processus.
INNOVAUD nous soutient depuis de nombreuses années, également le canton de Vaud avec le service de la promotion économique et de l'innovation. Les 2 entités nous suivent de près. Pour ce qui concerne l'état de Vaud, c'est beaucoup de subventions en fait pour la formation des collaborateurs et puis pour le développement de nouveaux produits et la participation à des événements. Concernant INNOVAUD, c'était du soutien pour trouver du financement, notamment, je m'en souviens à l'époque, ligne de crédit quand on était encore une start-up. Et puis depuis quelques années, on fait partie de ce label Scale Up Vaud et INNOVAUD organise des rencontres de patrons de Scale Up qui sont extrêmement utiles.
Perfect. All right, so this was a quick introduction on my side. I think now we are going to jump in the heart of the topic. We have Pierre-Jean with us now that will explain also the role of INNOVAUD in supporting entrepreneurs in the canton de Vaud. Pierre-Jean, I will stop sharing my screen and you can start sharing yours.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
So do you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not
Here we
yet.
go.
Do you see it now?
Now.
Okay. I put it wide. Thank you very much. And I'm very pleased to co-organize those events with VentureLab. I'm an innovation advisor at INNOVAUD. We're the hub for innovation in Vaud. Basically, we're a sister organization of the Service à Promotion Économique, and we're here to foster the development of high-tech companies here in the canton. So basically, I would have to say we're now in a mode of new INNOVAUD because at the beginning of the year, we just fused with another entity in the ecosystem, with the Développement Économique, to create the new form of INNOVAUD. So excuse us, we don't have the new visual entity, but we're fusing to have a greater impact. What does it mean concretely? We have 5 pillars to support high-tech companies. The first one, which is historically the pillar of INNOVAUD, is to connect the innovators and the innovative companies with the ecosystem, with the partners who can provide financing, coaching, access to expertise, hosting, etc., etc. The second pillar, invest, is historically the pillar of the Développement Économique. So this is all the service provided to welcome companies and to assist companies, foreign companies, to set in our canton. And of course, together we make some promotion of the success of the companies and promotion also of the quality of our ecosystem. And then on top of that, we have 2 new pillars. The first one is expand. And basically this is to help companies to go global. Switzerland is quite a small market, and it's critical for them, for the companies to go global for their success. If you were here last week, actually the program Scale Up was within this context. And the last one is to explore. Basically, through the exploration, we mean having a strategic intelligence of all the innovation ecosystem around the world, to see what are the best practices, to see what are the key metrics, and also to align and to compete in the high league. So basically, these are the 5 pillars that circumscribe our activities. Still, we're focusing on high tech, and these are the few industries that we're focusing on: microtechniques, food and nutrition, clean technologies, information technologies, life sciences, and digital. And as for myself, I am innovation advisor for life sciences and food and nutrition. And just before closing my short presentation, I just wanted to put the faces, because I hate to have anonymized slides, but we're a whole team. It's not up to date yet, but basically you can see all the faces that joined the team now. Just want to highlight Patrick Barbet, who has been nominated director of the new INNOVAUD. And yes, basically that's it on our side. So if you want to be aware of all what is happening here, our ecosystem, the success of the companies, please subscribe either to our newsletter, the application, our Twitter feed, or even our LinkedIn feed. And yeah, that's it. Just one slide why we thought it was really interesting to see to investigate this aspect of regulatory affairs and COVID. We know that the CE mark for medical device is an inescapable milestone to have in the company. So what happens when you're in a situation, a COVID situation, where actually there's like any other industries, the industry of the notified body is also reduced. They cannot travel, they cannot do on-site audits for your stuff. Also, when you go to clinical trials units, most of them are turning down or refocusing their activities towards activities related to the COVID. Also, when the supply chain is completely turned down and you cannot do your prototypes or your proof of concepts anymore, and also when the whole organization of the team has to be reorganized due to the social distances, etc., etc. So what does it take when you have this new environment and you have to meet your milestone? And this is why we wanted to give the vow to an expert and to two companies actually who will witness a little bit how they felt about that situation. So with that, I'm finished with my presentation and I stop sharing my slide, and Julia, I give you the word.
Thank you, Pierre-Jean. That was quite interesting, and I would like now to invite Philippe Etter to join us and share his screen. Thank you very much, Philippe, from Medidee, for being with us and sharing then more now the legal framework and like the possibilities that all the entrepreneurs that are in this call with us today are probably asking themselves. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. How much time do you give me, knowing do I need to catch up or do I still have the time?
I think between 12 and 15-minute presentation would be fantastic.
Okay, 15. Thank you very much. So we are a regulatory and a clinical and quality consulting firm, and our mission is to help companies to get their product approved. Now, when you look at it during a crisis like COVID, you can easily imagine that the rules of the game are slightly changed. And of course, we're going to talk about the various possibilities that manufacturers have in front of them in order to still put, between brackets, products on the market, between brackets again. So these last months, we have had a lot of demand from companies who wanted, on more or less serious projects, to put their product on the market. And I'm going to try to explain the various cases. So our firm is based in Switzerland. We have offices in Germany, in Denmark, in Belgium, in the US. I'm in charge of the US office. But nowadays it's better to be in Switzerland. That's where I'm here. And I'm going to first explain the approval process, normal, and what is named a derogation. And this is related to EU. At the end, I will talk slightly about the US, but I don't think it's the focus of attention today. If you look at medical devices in general, including also in vitro diagnostic devices, you basically have two types of products. You have products who require a notified body, typically medical devices class 1S, 1M, 2A, 2B, 3, where you need to have a notified body, and IVDs such as list A, list B. Well, list A, list B, like HIV tests, like hepatitis tests, you don't have too many of those who are at the edge of the market right now, because it's not COVID related. So what you would have as a COVID-related IVD product would be, for example, an auto test, like a home test for COVID. That would belong to the product classes who require a notified body. Now, if you try to obtain a classic CE mark, it's beyond urgency in terms of time frame, because a CE marking by a notified body, knowing that they cannot travel too much, knowing they have too much work anyway because of the arrival of MDR, IVDR, takes 4-6 months to the best. I mean, it can even go up to 1 year. So that road where you would affix the CE mark thanks to the work of a notified body cannot be taken. Now, there's another road that has been opened by most of the competent authorities in Europe, where one country gives the approval for a specific use of a device that is not yet fulfilling the essential requirements of a directive. It's an approval for a given use, given intended use, given space. It means you can use at this hospital or this hospital. You need to give a positive list. You cannot invade the market of with this product. And there's also a limitation because it needs to be aligned with some sort of needs. I mean, you cannot rush up the Swiss National Competent Authority, SwissMedic, or the ANSM in France, or the FACH in Belgium, if there is no need for such a device. Now, for low-class devices, and typically an IVD COVID test belongs to this low class of device, you go under a self-certification concept. It means that you can put the product on the market by just notifying your National Competent Authority. It means you fill a form, you send it. The National Competent Authority still has the right to ask you more information. So it means you cannot just say, okay, we have no technical documentation, we're going to throw the product on the market and fill the form. That doesn't work. So to sum it up, you can either, for a high-class device, ask for a derogation, and for a low-class device, simply CE mark it using the self-certification scheme. That's the general concept. Now, what you need to be careful of is that if you use the derogation system, it's one by country. It means you need to go country after country, and you may have discrepancies between one country and another. I'm going to take different cases. Like, as I mentioned, a classic COVID IVD test would be a self-certification. In the future, it would become an IVDR product. So you would basically need a sufficient technical documentation now to go to SwissMedic to fill the form and get it approved. And a lot of companies did recently. For an IVD self-test, you wouldn't be able to do that. When I mean self-test, I don't mean an IVD where you collect yourself and you send to a lab where the test is done. I really mean an IVD like a pregnancy test where you get the result by yourself. For such a device, you would need a review by a notified body. It's too slow. That wouldn't fly. So you need to go through a derogation process using the competent authority, though slight doubts about the fact you will get the approval. For wearable, we've seen a lot of these little wearables with an app where you try to detect like motion of the skin, coughing, those sort of signals of COVID, for example. This may be a self-certification under the current MDD with the same phenomenon mechanism as for an IVD for COVID. It means you would self-declare the thing, and you wouldn't still need to be careful to have technical documentation, especially related to the software compliance, because you will need it anyway later. One big information to know is that all the softwares who are currently self-certified, with the upcoming MDR, they will go up in class. There will be class 2A, class 2B, and that will require way more evidence. Or let's say it doesn't really require more evidence. The difference is that someone will look at the evidences. Whereas with the self-certification, you don't face too much of a review. Now for PPE, for gloves, it can be either medical device and or under the PPE regulation. There's a lot of tests. It means if you invent something new, it takes quite a while before you can go through the normal pathway and get the CE mark on it. It costs, and these tests are to be done by specialized lab. It is feasible, but it requires a lot of good planning. Now, concerning a derogation by SwissMedic, we really doubt that SwissMedic will give a lot of derogation because Asian products now are, I mean, the supply chain is back up. Products are flowing on the market. So it's only if you have something really special. Now, respirators, that's an annoying case because it is not a self-certification. So you can only go, because of the class, you can only go through a derogation. And as there is currently no real need in the Swiss hospitals, there's a very low likelihood that the Swiss competent authority would give you a derogation for respirators, especially knowing that an oversimplified respirator could be quite dangerous. So that's the general example for different type of devices. Now, imagine you would have a real innovative, when I mean real, I mean a new therapy. For example, we've seen people going slightly away from dialysis adding a special filter to filter the blood of a patient who would be very sick because of COVID, then there typically you would get the derogation from Swissmedic. There's a high likelihood because there's a real benefit, direct benefit, and there's no other product like that on the market yet, or it's only starting. So it means you could get the derogation from Swissmedic. You would need to prepare a little dossier, submission dossier. You would get the answer within 15 days roughly. And in parallel, you would need to set up a clinical investigation, because sooner or later, Swissmedic would knock on the door and tell you, okay, do you have data now showing that it really, really works? And of course, you wouldn't be able to stay on the market forever with that. I mean, staying on the market, if you benefit from a derogation, is not really the right word. It's not a real placement on the market. It's just a derogation. So you need to expect that at some point of time, the competent authority will say, now we want to flush the market of these. Either you are now CE marked or you cannot stay. Now, the bottom line is that this example is good for a company who is already a legal manufacturer, as a medtech legal manufacturer. I mean, for a startup who would never have put a product on the market, suddenly becoming the legal manufacturer of a complex machine for plasma exchange, etc., that would be quite a stretch. Huh? So that would require a lot of attention. Now, another example, which we've seen recently, is typically you have Asian, like Chinese, COVID, IVD serology tests. They come to Swiss manufacturers, or rather a Swiss distribution company goes to China to source products and says, okay, I want to put it under my name in Switzerland because the Swiss brand has a lot of value, and I want to distribute that in France and in Germany, etc., etc. You have to be very, very careful with this. It's a self-certification, but what we have observed on the market is a very heterogeneous level of quality and conformity. And even for one test, you can have one batch delivery, which is good, and the next one, which is not. So that means that you cannot, as a company established in Switzerland, just buy stuff, put your name on, send the form to Swissmedic and start selling without opening your eyes, without installing careful QC checks, and high likelihood also that your distributors will ask you, the further people who are going to distribute on the markets will ask evidences. So, I mean, you would need to embark on a national external QC program to make sure that your test is really working. That would be quite a stretch for a company who maybe never did it so far. So that is a little bit of a dream. The previous one is something way stronger. Some links, I mean, I guess that the slides will be available after. You have some links to the process for obtaining a derogation. There's now a consolidation at the European level. There's also a tracker that is very interesting to see the various big adventures that have been triggered all over Europe. It's very useful to go see these documents. They are pretty good. Well, Swissmedic doesn't exactly tell you how she judges your derogation request. So that remains something a little bit obscure. Now, after, there's always a question of after. Once you have this derogation, if you applied for one, you still need to get prepared for CE marking. If you don't have a system, you need to get your company certified. You need to build a relationship with the notified body. That would require a lot of attention soon. And the central point is to gather clinical data. It means during the phase where your device is being used under derogation, you need to gather as much data as possible in order to support a future CE marked. Now, for the devices that you will have put because of low classes directly on the market without the derogation, like an IVD test, for example, for COVID, you need to prepare for IVDR. There's a big step up with IVDR. Again, gathering clinical data. In the US, well, a lot of people complain about the US currently, but regulatory-wise, I can tell you that US is pretty lean and clean and transparent. I mean, there's a list of approved devices updated. Last Friday, the FDA has removed 29 authorization for use from COVID tests, because it's exactly what I was saying 2 slides ahead. They noticed that some of the Chinese tests were really lacking performance. So the system of the FDA is quite powerful. If you want to obtain a derogation because your product really brings something in the COVID crisis, you can have a fairly good understanding from the FDA. You have the email address, you can send directly emails. They don't behave like the national competent authorities in Europe, who are like in a castle, half listening to what the market really needs. So of course, you know that I'm in charge of the American office of Medidee, so that's why I have a little bias. Huh? But I mean, everybody's afraid of FDA. Usually FDA is way clearer than the others. Next step, we have on the June 3rd, a full half-day conference related to COVID testing, typically, and the various pathways. So I do a little bit of advertising. If you want to know more, in fact, it's just what I just explained, made by 3 professionals during 3 hours rather than 15 minutes. So that's it. Questions, if I can answer them.
Thank you, Philippe. Yes, I see a couple of questions now in the Q&A session. The first one is this process also valid for validating the software using and connecting medical devices? I think you touched upon this at some point, but maybe you can remind our participants.
Okay, so when you have a software, you always need to ask yourself, is the software itself a medical device or not? For example, if I have a software in a hospital that is organizing the beds, the availability of beds or surgeons, it is not a medical device in itself. However, if it's a software that is driving different physical medical devices, gathering information from them, or giving a diagnosis, etc., the answer is yes. They are themselves a medical device that needs to be classed. And currently under the MDD, most of the software have a very low class. It means you can put them using the self-certification process. Now you need to be very careful because most of them are going to go up. I hope I answered.
Splendid. We have a second one that maybe we can also have now. So is it possible to obtain authorization for COVID-19 self-test in Switzerland without the CE mark? Yeah.
For a COVID-19 self-test, it would be worth trying. Yes. Now you could expect quite a lot of reluctancy from Swissmedic because, I mean, some competent authorities have already banned this for the time being. Of course, they're going to change their mind when there's going to be good products. And I assume the person asking has a good product. So theoretically, it's possible, but expect questions from Swissmedic. We have tried repeatedly to talk with Swissmedic about that, but Swissmedic is very hermetic about sharing. It's the opposite of the FDA. With the FDA, you can talk and ask, what is your concept? What is your strategy? With Swissmedic, usually they tell you, we cannot talk, there's a conflict of interest and whatever. So I cannot tell you exactly how fast they would be, but theoretically, the answer is yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Philippe. You are staying with us until the end of this webinar. So if there are more questions, we'll take them later. Thank you very much. I would now like to invite Brij Sahi, CEO of SwissDeCode, a company that has developed rapid and portable DNA detection tool, and they have been brave enough to transform this or give an attempt to transforming this in a COVID test. And I'm very glad to have you here, Brij, to tell that story and share with us how you managed to go through the regulatory hustle that it must have been.
Sure. Firstly, a good morning to everybody. And Julia, thank you very much for having me here. I have to start by saying that we actually haven't completed the journey yet, and we're still in the journey for the conversion. But why don't I just tell you a little bit about SwissDeCode first. You can see my slides? Yeah, okay. So SwissDeCode was founded in 2016, April 2016, and we were based in the first year at Mass Challenge in Renault. And I just want to plug Mass Challenge here that for startups, it's a good way to go forward, especially in Canton Vaud. And SwissDeCode is basically, we have technology that allows us to decode the DNA of animals, plants, bacteria, and viruses within weeks. And we have a business model which basically says that we go out to the food industry and we ask them, you know, what problems do you have? And I'll give you a real life example. So there was a company that came to us and said, look, we have an issue with the cocoa supply chain. There is a particular virus that is killing the cocoa plant, and we need a rapid on-site test for this cocoa plant, for this particular virus. Can you do it? Because it said the test has to be performed on the farms in Ivory Coast and Ghana, and the normal PCR tests which are performed where the samples are sent to the lab is just not going to work. So we worked on this particular project before COVID-19 and everything was going well. And the test was extremely sensitive, and we were moving forward to the validation stage. And then COVID-19 struck, and what we found as SwissDeCode focused on the food industry, we found that the projects that the customers were going to work with us, the paid projects, they were all put on hold, delayed. Even this particular virus for the cocoa plant, it was going to be actually tested by the University of Arizona, and the University of Arizona closed down because of coronavirus. And the lab itself, because we asked, look, why don't you send the samples over to us? But there was somebody in the lab who had caught coronavirus, and so the lab was actually shut down completely. So that's the first thing. Then the second thing that happened to us, and maybe others have found this as well, that our suppliers suddenly started to apply what I call the COVID payment rates, which is they want, from startups, they want payment up front before they start shipping anything. And that was to help their cash flow, but it really didn't help our cash flow at all. So we felt a little bit stuck between a stone and a hard place, and rock and a hard place. And then what we realized is that we suddenly realized that the COVID virus itself is actually the same as any other virus. And, you know, we decided that we wanted to embrace this COVID-19 and that we were going to create a solution. And at about the same time, we started getting phone calls from companies saying, do you know what? We need to do environmental testing of our factory because the staff don't want to come back to work. And I give you examples of, let's see now, in Canada, it was Cargill. In Germany, there was a sausage factory. Out of 200 employees, 150 tested positive. Tyson, the meat factory in the United States, where there were a large number of occurrences. And so we were getting a lot of feedback from companies to say, can we have the COVID test for environmental surfaces? So then we started to look down this route and see what we can do. And one of the things that we did is we contacted the Swiss National COVID-19 Task Force. And we basically asked them, what are the issues? What are the problems? What can we do for you? And this is one thing I would recommend to any startup. Go and talk to the experts. Talk to Philippe and Medidee and his company, but go and talk to all the hospitals and their clinical laboratories to really try and understand what the issues are that they are facing. It's not always what you read in the press. It's quite surprising. And so we decided that we wanted to build what we call a master mix solution. So one very strong piece of feedback we had was that we can't do enough tests in the laboratories because the PCR machines are taking too long. And then the second piece of feedback we had was that the supply chain for these particular PCR machines, and there are about 25 big manufacturers in the world, companies like Roche, Thermo Fisher, QIAGEN, all of these. The supply chain for supplying the reagents for these PCR machines has been severely stressed and in some cases stopped. And they weren't getting what they needed. But then they turned around to us and said, well, so we said we can create a solution that will actually replace the reagents that you're looking for. And for a while that went very well. but then other companies came into play and they could supply alternatives to the big 25. And so then we kept talking to the hospitals and the laboratories and the clinics, and they say, you know, what we really need is actually localized testing, where we can go to the care homes, where we can go to the clinics out in the front line, rather than the big production laboratories in the big hospitals. So I said, okay, let's see what we can do. And now we've been working down this process, and as Philippe said, we can self-certify. But knowing that we have to be able to provide all the technical documentation for the solution that we're creating, what we are doing is twofold. Number one is we are already ISO 17025, so we have a quality management system in place. And what we need to do is to take that management system up a level to the ISO 13485. And a point of disclosure here, we have engaged with Medidee to help us bridge that gap from 17025 to 13485, and they will help us do that. And then in terms of the self-certification, because very strong technical documentation required, we are working with hospitals and private laboratories in Switzerland. We are receiving human samples of coronavirus, anonymous, and we are basically building up a validation file that we will submit as part of our CE-IVD certification, but also keep for ourselves for any inspection that may be required. And then, because we are also now engaged with many other governments around the world, they all have their peculiar nuances, and Philippe touched on the American ones, but they basically go along the lines of, you've got to have CE-IVD certification, and then we want to do our own testing over and above that. And then they have different requirements for testing, whether it's 30 samples, 50 samples, whatever it is. And we basically need to comply with those regulatory implications as well. And we're ready for that. For us, going forward, SwissDeCode is actually going to remain in the food industry. And we will probably have something to one side, which will be focused on human diagnostics, whatever it may be. We're not quite sure yet. We believe it's going to take some time to eradicate COVID-19, but the way we're positioning ourselves now is that we're actually ready for the future. It took us less than 2 weeks to create the test for COVID-19, and it'll take us less than that, I would imagine, for the next pandemic that may come about. But what takes the time this time is the CE-IVD certification and all the processes and steps we have to go through to get there. But if we have that in place already, then we'll be able to react very, very quickly to the next pandemic. We're going to be helping the food supply chain. That's where SwissDeCode started. And we want to make sure that we basically secure the food supply chain for all of us, and that we can continue working. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Brij. We will have a look. So apparently a lot of the notified bodies are extremely busy at the time. Would you say that you had a hard time getting in touch and finding a contact there, or was it no problem for you?
Well, because we're going for the self-certification, the first thing that we basically did as a team was to do our research. And because we are ISO 17025, we already have people on board in our team who understand the overall approval process. They've worked in human laboratories as well, so they know what to do. And so we actually had the advantage of having experienced people in the team who knew what to look for, where to look for it, and then to ensure that we were going to start complying. And that's how we were able to put a process in place to go from 17025 to 13485.
Perfect, thank you. I'm looking, I don't see more questions at the moment. So you will do this process in Europe mainly, Brij, or are you also considering going to the US and selling this further away?
We will go overseas as well, but we start here. And then we contact basically distributors out in the various countries that we are in discussion with. And then we allow them to take us to the necessary regulatory process in those countries. And that's how we're doing it.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will now invite our next speaker to join. We have Michael Friedrich. Are you with us? Hello, good to see you. So Michael Friedrich is the CEO of Distalmotion. Distalmotion is a company that has built robotic, how we call that, robotic aid for complex surgical tasks. I hope I pronounced that right. Extremely impressive. I was actually in their offices at the Biopôle not that long ago. Quite impressive machines they have built, and also a large company, I think over 100 employees. And the question was, okay, how has the COVID crisis impacted your regulatory plan and all the things that you are struggling with at the moment? So Michael, thanks for being here. Can you share your screen?
Yep. Good morning, everyone. Can you see the screen?
Yes, you can put full screen even. I think.
Okay, very good.
So
we have 100 legs, but only 50 brains. So we are half the size still. We're about 50 employees. But thanks for the introduction. Indeed, we create surgical robots. We are at Biopôle, which are great facilities for scaling up a medical device venture, and I'm happy to walk you a little bit through what Distalmotion is, what we do, and then give you a sense for how this whole COVID situation impacts us. A quick heads up, it's for us actually rather positive. I will explain you why later on. And I also, thanks to Philippe and Brij for their presentations, I would also like to just make sure that even this year, there's also a medical device world outside COVID, which continues to thrive and which needs to continue developing, because there's other diseases that need treatment as well, and they should not be forgotten in these extraordinary days. So with that, to start, we are initially a spin-off from EPFL. It's from the robotics lab where our founder started it in 2013 as a small spin-off. I then joined the company 2014 after selling a previous medical device venture in which Brij actually was a partner of. So we go back a long time. We have quite strong patents, some of them from EPFL, but then most of the relevant patents have been filed by us. The team is, for now, still strongly R&D focused. We have direct sales. We have a small sales team of 5 people, which is located in Germany and France and the UK, just to create a little bit of market traction, because from the very early day on, we have been working closely with surgeons and nurses to understand what their needs are to improve quality of surgery in urology, gynecology, and general surgery, which is where we are active. And so what you see on the right side is an example of a Dexter prototype being used already back in 2015 at Wipff as part of a clinical procedure at the time. So this was, at the time, a fully mechanical system, reusable, and hence a class 1 device, which we were able to auto-certify at the time because it's a class 1 device, which is a bit of a loophole in the medical device directive, but sometimes, given that it's a legal loophole, these loopholes are opportunities when you are a venture, and sometimes consulting companies like Medidee can help you identify those strategies in using these loopholes to go to clinics early, which is what we did, as you can see on the right, on about a dozen of human patients. At Distalmotion, we strongly focus on those activities where we add value ourselves, and that is R&D and strategic marketing. However, manufacturing is not something that we have a lot of value to add, so we work with contract manufacturers in Switzerland to make our product. Our product is called Dexter, surgical robot, which consists of a surgeon console on the left side, where the surgeon can either sit or stand, take those 2 hand controls can you see my mouse, by the way? Just shaking your head, or you cannot see my mouse. Okay, it doesn't matter. So on the left side, you have the surgeon console, where the surgeon can grab a left and a right hand control, which captures the movement of the surgeon's hand, and these motions are then replicated to the patient side, which you can see on the right side with the 2 patient cards, each carrying one of those thin sticks. Each of them are an instrument going into the patient, replicating the movement of the surgeon's hands at the surgeon console. So why do we do robots? What is it? Why is there any use for patients and healthcare systems? Overall, when you do surgery in these anatomies, so urology, gynecology, and general surgery, you fundamentally have 2 techniques of performing your procedure. You can either do a large incision and go in with your hands in what is called open surgery, or you can do a couple of small incisions and go in with what is called minimally invasive surgery. Whenever you can do a procedure minimally invasively, the patients, they recover faster, they have less infections, they have less complications, they are faster out of the hospital, which is, by the way, good in COVID times. And overall, it reduces the cost of care to treat these diseases. In Europe and the US, there's about 12 million procedures being done in these anatomies in the abdominal area, of which only half have access to minimally invasive surgery today. The reason being that minimally invasive surgery done traditionally is very difficult to learn and very difficult to perform. It's what is called laparoscopy, where you have very simple basic instruments that actually are not more sophisticated than chopsticks to do your surgical task, surgical work, and that is very difficult to learn and very exhausting to perform, which is why only about half of the surgeons have learned to perform those procedures minimally invasively, and that is where surgical robots come in, which currently cover about 1 million of those 12 million procedures, because robots, they massively simplify minimally invasive surgery and make minimally invasive surgery much easier and much more standardized, and hence better to perform by everyone. So the mission of robotic surgery is really to make minimally invasive surgery standard of care. So where do we stand time-wise, by the way? We have about let's say 6-7 minutes left. In these types of procedures, you have laparoscopy, which is the picture on the top left side, where you have these very basic instruments, and on the bottom you have traditional robotics, where the surgeon is actually separated from the surgeon and cannot interact with the patient, and has to perform the entire procedure as being seated in that console, much like a drone pilot. And what we do at Distalmotion, we actually combine those both approaches. We acknowledge that some parts of the procedure are best done laparoscopically, and other parts, which are suturing and dissection, are best done robotically. And so what we introduce is a new category of robotic surgery, where the surgeon is not locked in a console outside the sterile field, but where actually the surgeon can switch between laparoscopy, meaning manual surgery, and robotic surgery very quickly, because he or she remains scrubbed in, and because that switching is very fast. So what you see on the left side, the blue person standing, is the surgeon performing the task laparoscopically at the patient, which are usually short and specialized tasks. And then within 20 seconds, the surgeon can go back to the robot and perform those tasks, the suturing and dissection task robotically, which is what you see on the right side, where the surgeon is seated at the surgeon console performing the tasks robotically. Due to that simplification of robotic surgery, we also drastically reduced the cost of robotic surgery by a factor of 3 compared to other solutions, which is really making robotic surgery all of a sudden affordable for all healthcare systems. We sell Dexter once it has CE mark in Q3. We will sell it for less than the manufacturing costs of our competitors, which is a really strong price advantage. And that allows us to really go out of the niche into standardization of robotic surgery. There's a lot of procedures that are still untapped. I will speed up a little bit, particularly outside the US, where robotics has limited penetration, but also inside the US in general surgical applications, there's very little robotics because traditional robotics is too expensive and too complex. We have strong tractions with surgeons and hospitals. By now, almost 500 surgeons in pipeline, so really strong feedback for this type of novel approach. And now really the big challenge remains, as Philippe said, to get regulatory clearance and go through that gate. Initially, in the pre-COVID times, we looked at 3 scenarios for CE marking. We looked at a preferred scenario A, where we would get CE marking under Medidee without clinical data because we can demonstrate equivalence to the Da Vinci from a clinical evaluation perspective. And we expected CE marking in Q2 this year. The first fallback scenario B would have been to go under MDR, which, by the way, was supposed to enter into force today, which has been postponed now by a year. To go under MDR without clinical data, this was a strategy that was actually supported by our notified body. And the worst scenario would have been scenario C, in which we would have had to do a clinical study prior to CE marking, and this would have added 1 year of additional work to perform the study to obtain CE marking. So we were really working very hard under a lot of pressure to finalize the submission and obtain CE marking by today. And when COVID hit early March, this whole scenario planning really changed, because Medidee was actually going to remain valid for 1 more year with the MDR postponement. And that means we can now safely obtain CE marking under Medidee without clinical data and without regulatory uncertainty. The submission has already started. First work packages have already been approved by the notified body, and we are now really sure that we can get the CE marking in Q3. We've also done the electrical safety EMI testing already, so this all looks very good. Which also means that the clinical study that we anyway plan to do remains a post-market study, where we actually do the study after CE marking with a CE mark device, and we collect that data starting the coming winter for an upgrade then to MDR, which will take place somewhere next year, so 2021. Once we have initial clinical data, we can then upgrade to MDR and really have a lot of pressure that has been taken out of our roadmap with it. So long story short, to conclude, given the postponement of MDR by 1 year, we have 1 year more to submit, which really gave us a lot of additional certainty and saved us a bit, because we were really short on time. What we, however, do is for that post-market study, because we expect slower enrollment rates in the coming winter, because we expect the second wave, we increase the study sites from 2 to 4 clinical study sites, which is fine because they're anyway customers, and so then we just have more customers involved in that study. We also think it's very healthy that the notified bodies have 1 year more to obtain MDR accreditation, particularly also the Swiss one, SQS. They have not yet the MDR accreditation, and so this will take out pressure of the European regulatory system, giving these notified bodies more time to obtain accreditation. And it really people continue to work, and also the notified bodies, they continue to work. We are back in the office since May 11 with the full team. Life returns, and you find new ways to collaborate. We allow we allow every team member to have at least one day of home office. If they talk to their superior, they can have a second day of home office. So you need to introduce some flexibility, but by doing that, you can actually, we have seen that we can regain a lot of momentum. So we have seen a little bit of a hit, maybe 3 months, due to home office and childcare and schools that are closed and some limited supplier slowdowns, but these are manageable timeline changes. What is, however, also clear is that commercially we already planned to focus on German, French, and French-speaking Europe plus the UK. We will certainly not accelerate expansion outside those territories, particularly into southern and eastern Europe, until the situation stabilizes. But there is, for us, no rush, because we are just getting started commercially, and we know that particularly the German-speaking part of Europe has managed COVID really well, and is strong, particularly in the healthcare system, to continue with all types of surgeries, which is very favorable for us. Then from a financing side, we are currently working on a substantial Series D financing round. I think we touched a bullet here, because we work with strategic investors that continue being interested in it. We clearly, however, also see that financial investors, they're more reluctant at this point, and particularly reflect that also in valuation, that they want to see lower valuations, which is a pain. But we somehow magically don't need to depend on those financial investors, at least for the time being, which is good. So it's yeah, that was the overview of what COVID, of who Distalmotion is and what COVID means for us. I know it's maybe not the expected presentation of, oh, everything is difficult, everything is bad, because it's not the case, and there is just, by adapting, that there are new opportunities showing up, and everyone wants to continue working, also the notified bodies and also the hospitals, they want to continue, and we just need to find new ways as entrepreneurs to tackle those challenges. But I think as entrepreneurs we are particularly well adapted to handling uncertainty and to working with uncertainty. We always have a lot of uncertainty as entrepreneurs, and this is just a different uncertainty, but we need to address it like every other uncertainty that we work with, and then I think we can cope with it reasonably well. So, Eamon, that was my little speech. If there is any questions, please shoot.
Thanks, Michael. Actually, I think it was really appreciated by everyone probably in the call to have some optimism in these times. I see a couple of questions here from Regis. How do you think will MDR impact the process for combination product class 3 MD?
So the question, if I understand it was for me, the question. But
oh yeah, right. Yeah, sorry, that's a good point. Yeah, that's the first question. There's another one for Michael. Maybe, yeah, Philippe, you can take this one, and
I'm glad
the next one.
This one, and to not take this one, in fact, because it would require 1 hour, because it really depends on the device. There's high-class devices which can benefit, like for example, the active implants, neuromodulation, all that stuff can go into the MDR quite safely. Now, there are other devices which, for example, are coated or resorbable, or those type of guys. They may require a lot of attention in terms of clinical data, because very often they got approved under the MDD, using limited data, and sometimes the companies have not gathered post-market clinical follow-up data sufficiently. So it's very hard to answer this question generally. It depends on actually the device. So I would prefer not starting to answer because it would just generate confusion. It depends on the device.
Thank you, Philippe. So Michael, based on which criteria did you actually select your ARA consultants?
We actually don't work with an RA consultant. We do that in-house, but there are good consultants in Switzerland, experienced consultants, Medidee, Confinis, a number of them that know the ecosystem, that know to work with ventures, that know to be pragmatic and help finding ways to you know, navigating these landscapes and developing strategies. So it's just with us, we have quite a bit of experience in-house, and we didn't have the need to work with third parties for that matter.
That's impressive. I would like to ask you also regarding the clinical studies. So you mentioned that you are now going to double the amount. Isn't it hard in COVID times to make sure that you have, like, that people are into making new clinical studies? Was that a problem to find?
No, not at all, because you still have cancer. You still have hernias that you need to repair. You still have kidneys that stop working. You still have all these clinical issues, and so you need that's why I said at the beginning, there's a life outside and beyond COVID, which is actually clinically much more important. There are many more patients affected by non-COVID diseases that need treatment, and so those physicians, those surgeons, those healthcare systems, they absolutely want to continue developing solutions for those patients. It's just you need to tackle logistics, and which is why we double the number of sites. But that is just a tactical decision. That is the need is absolutely there, and I think it will become even more apparent in the coming month. The backlog that has been accumulated in the healthcare system for patients that have neglected their non-COVID diseases or issues.
A participant is asking, do you offer clinical device studies to other science entrepreneurs?
I'm happy to contact. I'm not sure I understand what the question fully, but we can talk offline.
So someone asked if it is possible to avoid the prohibition to provide a COVID-19 self-test to lay users in Switzerland.
It is probably possible. It's about how you can discuss with SwissMedic. We are currently trying to build a framework for discussing that. It's a very interesting question. At some point of time, we think this, I think with this, it's not a formal prohibition, by the way, but I think the lines are moving. We are with Swiss Medtech, you know, the umbrella organization of Swiss manufacturers. We are trying to convince SwissMedic to be more open, to discuss a little bit more these subjects. And probably if we keep on pushing, we're gonna obtain something. Now, what you have to understand is that there's been a lot of move in SwissMedic recently. There's been a lot of people leaving, some of them working for some of our competitors, which is nice. And in fact, you find in SwissMedic a lot of people, a majority of people who are dealing with the medtech products who are actually pharma people. And for pharma people, it takes 15 years to put a product on the market. So that means the discussion on how to move lines is quite complex, but it is going on. So we need to keep hope. I mean, for sure, it's not going to be possible to avoid these type of products forever. In Belgium, they have decided to ban them. but one day they're going to change their mind. So lines are moving. Sorry for this fuzzy answer, but I cannot say more.
That's perfect. We have a question from Friedrich. Generally speaking, is there any advantage of being in Switzerland to obtain the CE marking or other marketing authorization?
Not really. I mean, what is dramatic is that Switzerland has, besides Ireland, the highest density of medtech per capita. 69 people per 10,000 are working in the medtech, and we have a very tiny notified body, one. We have a competent authority who sometimes struggles understanding the real challenges. So we don't feel so strong in Switzerland, and that would require attention. There's a lot of innovation, of decent investment, but we would need Swissmedic and a notified body, for example, to install a big office in Switzerland. Now, besides that, the other difficulty that is linked with the MRA, the Mutual Recognition Agreement, because now we saved 1 year with the pushback of the MDR, but the problem is going to be back on the table in May of next year. If the politics don't understand that they need to work with Brussels to have a new framework to accept the CE, we're going to be simply considered as a third country, and our manufacturers will require an authorized representative in Europe. I mean, that's going to be a real mess. So the message to be transferred to the politics, and we are trying to do that also with Swiss Medtech. I mean, we noticed, for example, that the politics don't really understand the problem. They don't understand when you start explaining notified body, competent authority, CE marking, class 1, class 2, etc. The politics are clearly, quickly lost. So we are trying to build a training for national councils, for example, a bunch of them, 3, 4, so that they can push a little bit more a thing that they would know better. So, I mean, the Swiss position is to be carefully looked at. I mean, it's a bit frightening for the time.
I would be
you
curious.
You do offer those services for EC Rep, Philippe.
Yes, we do, but I mean, it's against our desire. Our desire would be that we can keep on having. I mean, we give the service because there's a real need, but we would highly prefer to remain within the system of Europe.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was actually wondering, Michael, if you had also an opinion about that, because you're active in the US and in Europe, and do you feel that Switzerland is maybe a more suitable place for this type of, or easiest place to start with for this type of regulatory decisions?
The regulatory hurdles with the European Union, this is a risk that just needs to be taken into account from the start. And it is the political reality that we're not part of EU and not going to be part of EU anytime soon. And so this is just something we need to work with. But it's a solvable issue. There are bigger challenges that we face as entrepreneurs. Yes, it would be easier had we lower barriers, and particularly also had we stronger notified bodies, larger notified bodies. This certainly, everything would help. But I don't think that this is the biggest challenge we have as medical device entrepreneurs overall, looking at it top down. But it is a challenge that needs to be taken into account.
Maybe just jumping on that one, what would then be the biggest challenge that you are facing at the moment, or the thing that is keeping you up at night?
Well, at the end of the day, for various reasons, financing and just the amount of money it takes to get it. As a medical device venture, in most cases, it's impossible to build up an independent company that is growing strongly, and it just takes too much time, too much capital. For now, just to give you some examples, at Distalmotion, we have burned through 40 million to get the product to CE mark. We need another 80 million to become profitable in Europe. We would need another 200 to become profitable in the US, would we go alone. And these numbers are too big. And so we depend on strategics acquiring us at a certain point, but there's only a limited number of those strategics available, and it's very hard to convince them to do M&A early on. And so you need to go a long time with financing it with investors, with limited upside multiples, and that is what makes raising funds in these industries very, very challenging. And I think all the more senior, there are a couple of senior medical device entrepreneurs on the phone here as well. They can all share that. And so compared to this financing challenge and hurdle, the regulatory one is really manageable.
Thank you, Michael. We have one last question I see here. Is it worth to apply for the AUA with a serology COVID-19 self-test device? I guess this is for Philippe.
Yes, I was in process of replying. Some of the questions were replied in writing.
Thank you.
The answer there really depends on the strength of the file. It means if it's a really strong file, a really good test, I think there's still a window for going. Now, if it takes you another 2 months reasonably to solidify the documentation, I'm afraid the window will be closed. There will be too many devices on the market. The FDA will be restructuring the assessment of these devices. It might be too late. So it depends. Sorry, I mean, in regulatory, very often, a person asks a question and the guy who is supposed to answer has to ask 7 other questions before he or she can really reply with something solid. So there, it's a question of momentum and strength of the considered file.
This is a very good start of an answer, I think. And with that, I would like to thank you. I don't see more questions in the chat. So if anyone has a burning question, now would be the time to write it down. Other than that, I would like to start thanking the speakers of today, Philippe, Michael, Pierre-Jean, and actually Brij had to leave a bit earlier, but thank you to all of you for being with us today and for sharing your insights. I think we had very different stories that were shared here from people that enjoyed or like could benefit from the COVID to also Brij that had to go through new tracks on regulatory plans techniques, and this is something that is probably touching some of the participants that are with us today. So thank you very much for having participated in this call. I still don't see any further questions, so I think we're gonna end this webinar. This is the second one of a series that is, I'm just gonna show you one last time. Oops, I'll go up a bit. Here we go. So you have a quick look for everyone who would like to join the next webinars on June 9th and June 16th on how to manage your board during a crisis and how to foster corporate partnerships online. I would also like to thank Innovo for supporting this web series and being also with us today.
Great pleasure.
Yes, if you have any words of closing, if you would like to share something, Michael, Philippe, Pierre-Jean, you're very welcome to take the mic.
Thanks for organizing it, Julia.
Thank you very much. I think it's very important to understand we are Swiss, we can do great things in this country, but we need to fight.
Thank you. That's a beautiful message to end this webinar on. So I would like, Pierre-Jean, if you're with us, I don't know if you would like to share something.
No, I just wanted to address my best wishes of luck for the new start. We're in a decontainment phase, and I really hope the companies get back on track pretty soon. So that's my only message.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you, and I wish you then a wonderful end of morning and day and hope to see you all on June 9 for the next webinar of INNOVAUD EXPAND. Have a wonderful day.